Hey, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co. And if it wasn't already clear from the title, because I put it in the title, no one is buying game reviews. Now, this isn't about bias. I'm not talking about bias. Bias exists left, right, and center. 100% it does. But we'll talk about bias in a different video. This is not the topic of this conversation. The topic of this conversation is, like I said already, nobody's buying game reviews. Now, why am I talking about this? Because most of you already know this. Some of you think, oh, Alex, of course they are. How naive of you. But in a few recent games or videos, I've seen more and more conversation about the idea that opinions are for sale. And I think that's nonsense, like genuine nonsense. And I'll go through why. I didn't sit here and say, hey, let's put out a video just so I can tell you something without any reasonable conversation around it. But let's specifically talk about these two games here, Terraforming Mars and Destinies, because these two were the trigger as to why they are included here. Or why I'm talking about this topic, that is. And specifically, I recently did a video on Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition versus Terraforming Mars. And I like Ares Expedition, but I do not love it. It's leaving my collection. It just hasn't actually left, but it's leaving my collection. I don't see the need to play it again. But it's a good game, to be very clear. It's just not Terraforming Mars. It's not what I signed up for. I love Terraforming Mars, and I was merely okay with this. I felt it lost most of the flavor that was Terraforming Mars. It gives it to you in a more accessible playtime. I think this game is going to be right for a lot of people, which brings me to the next point. The Dice Tower, Four Squares, put out a review absolutely praising this. And if you read the comments of that video, there's a lot of people who seem to think that the Dice Tower's opinion was bought and paid for, which is absolutely nonsense. That's Destinies. Because this is another one, and this is one that I did love. Destinies is a game that I loved. Absolutely loved. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I think it's mechanically very light, but it is a ton of fun to dive into. I'm looking forward to dive into it again as soon as I can. And I loved it. I love it. And a lot of people love it. The Dice Tower Four Squares review. Everyone loved it. Left, right, and center, various content creators loved it. And then there are a few content creators who, similar to the way I didn't love Terraforming Mars, there are content creators who did not love Destinies. And they're the honest ones. They're the ones who are telling the truth. Similar to the way I was telling the truth by Terraforming Mars, my opinion and truth changes video to video, apparently. But there were, again, a lot of people and a lot of comments suggesting that opinions are for sale, which again is nonsense. And we'll go into why through a variety of reasons. And the first one is just, honestly, all of them. All of them come down to common sense. All of them come down to thinking through what you're suggesting and the ramifications of what you're suggesting, and whether it in any way makes sense for a content creator to secretly on the side, on the, subtle, whatever, black market, sell their opinion for a game. It doesn't make sense for a variety of reasons. And to begin with, is the risk just isn't worth it. How much money do you think it possibly takes to have your opinion secretly for sale, versus the fact that all you need is one person to let slip? In general, the general concept of conspiracy theories usually involve assuming that a whole bunch of people successfully kept a secret from the rest of the world. And that's going to be true here as well. If, insert name here, content creators were selling their opinion, how long would it take before someone else said, hey, you know what? That cost of that opinion is just not worth it. Do it for X, or we'll let people know. Or just someone on the side just wanted to tell the people. There's always going to be someone disgruntled. There's always going to be someone who lets something slip. There's always going to be someone who lets something leak. And I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of accusations thrown around over the years. These are just two recent ones. I'm just choosing two recent ones that were the topic, the inspiration for this video, but I've seen the general accusation available over the years for a while now. That idea that opinions are for sale. And I'm not talking about, by the way, forget just bias, I'm not talking about sponsored content either. Sponsored publicly content, when Man vs. Meeple, when Rado, when anyone else sits there and says, this is a sponsored video, that's a different conversation. Because that removes the whole secret aspect. They're telling you I'm being paid. That goes more into bias than the idea of secretly selling your opinion. Someone will always let the truth out sooner or later. It takes one ex-employee of a company. Which brings us to the second point. Do you think other companies don't have that cash flow? The idea that it's not worth it to them to sell their opinion? Take Merchant's Cove, another video that I mostly disagree with the Dice Tower on, because, well, except for Mike. Mike's got my back. But the Dice Towers, Four Squares, gave Merchant's Cove a passing grade, 6s or whatever it is. And then myself and Mike, a few other content creators, it's actually very mixed. This one's actually very mixed. There's people who like this one, people who don't. Across the board, there are people who really appreciate what it's doing. There are many who do not appreciate what it's doing. But again, the same idea pervades. Do you think Final Frontiers wasn't willing to cough up whatever a positive review cost? It's not some small, tiny company. They put out a large Kickstarter. It absolutely would be worth paying for that positive review, right? So what are the rules? What are the rules around when someone's willing to charge for their opinion versus not? Is Final Frontiers, is Merchant's Cove a sacrifice that Dice Tower had to make to preserve their legitimacy? The whole idea is nonsense. Now, it's one thing. It's one thing when you see a content creator who all they do, let's actually not even go down that road because we have to get to point 3 first. Point 3 first. And again, so point 1 is just the risk is just insane. It would come out. Point 2 is other companies can pay for it. I can point to dozens of other high brand, high profile games that the Dice Tower or any other channel you're accusing have done negative content on, or mixed or middling content that could have been positive had someone just paid the right amount. But the third point is how short-sighted would you have to be as a content creator to sell your opinion on games that weren't good? How genuinely short-sighted? Because think it through. Here's how it plays out. Let's take Destiny as an example. One of the reasons that people thought that Lucky Duck had bought a bunch of opinions is because Destiny's at its core looks like a simple game. It looks simple, it looks stupid, it looks like it's just basically here's an app and here's a little bit of a narrative aspect and now the rest of it just isn't fun. So inherently, if it doesn't look good, that means it isn't good. That means people who liked it sold their opinion. But people like it. A lot of people like it. And I'm not talking about content creators anymore. Take a look at the general ratings of any given game that you think the opinion was bought for. For the most part, over time, any content creator who's willing to sell their opinion will inherently not align with the rest of the general public at a certain point. I'm not talking about the exceptions. Exceptions will always be the case. Dwellings of Eldervale is a game that I just didn't care for the way the rest of the world seemed to. Ares Expedition, I don't know the rest of the world yet. We'll get to that soon, but I didn't care for it. But there are other games as well, games that I like. Besiege is a game that's rated like a 6.8 or something like that on Board Game Geek, and I really enjoy it. I keep trying to get rid of it, and I keep holding back because I like Besiege too much. Any individual game, a content creator will obviously defer from the general public on. But a content creator who's always telling you that bad games are good, at a certain point, you're going to look at that content creator and say, hey, this guy likes all these games, and the BGG ratings for all these games are that they're bad games, that they're not good games. It's so short-sighted to put your stamp of approval on a game that you know to be bad. And your answer there is like, well, no, Alex. They're only doing it if they know the game is good. Well, then that's a review. That's a review. If they know the game is good and they tell you it's good, that's a review. It would be so incredibly short-sighted. And this brings us to Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, by the way. One of the reasons that people thought their opinion was paid for is because they don't know enough about what's going on. For Destinies, the opinion is bought and paid for because the game looks too simple. Turns out people really like the game, not just content creators. For Ares Expedition, the problem was exactly the other way. The problem was if you look at the Board Game Geek rating for this, it's like a 5.7. Therefore, the Dice Tower is completely out of whack in alignment. And plus, that Board Game Co. guy didn't like it, so, they're obviously just paid for. Except, I don't know if you know this. I mean, if you watch my channel, you might already. But Ares Expedition has a 5.7 on Board Game Geek because a lot of people are annoyed at Stronghold Games for the way they handled the Kickstarter and the way they handled the retail release of the game. And those people are frustrated. Those people are frustrated and they're taking their frustration out. I'm not getting into the debate of correctly or incorrectly, but they're taking their frustration out on rating the game. They're basically saying, hey, this game's a 1. Is it a 1? Nothing to do with that. I'm upset at the company and so I'm tanking their game. It's review bombing. It's a concept that exists. And so the review bombing of the game leads the other people to watch the Dice Tower and say, hey, Dice Tower is completely out of alignment with reality. But the point is, in this case, there's an explanation. But in reality, that exact point, that exact aspect of the Dice Tower being out of alignment with reality is exactly the kind of thing that would happen on a frequent basis if opinions could be secretly bought on the black market. You'd have frequent opinions of this, frequent examples of the Dice Tower rated this poor game or whatever channel. Sorry, focusing on the Dice Tower, just, they are a large channel, they get a lot of this attention. Opinions aren't being secretly bought and paid for. Sponsored content exists. That's true. The Dice Tower has their Kickstarter segment. You want to accuse them of bias? You want to say, hey, Mark Street got paid to do a video and now they're talking about it on Crowdfunding Roundup? Well, first of all, if you've ever watched Crowdfunding Roundup, then you know that they have no problem talking negatively about a game that they got paid for. So they clearly are willing to do so, which kudos to them. It's something that's, I tell you now, practically speaking, even just working with a company makes it harder to say things negative. Bias, again, we're not talking about bias here. Bias is very much real. Bias is very much a thing, and bias is something you have to take into account and it has to be overcome. One of the reasons I try to be negative in every video, one of the reasons I always try to tell you what I don't like is because there's always something not to like. But I'm drifting again. The point isn't bias. The point is specifically the idea of people secretly talking about things behind the scenes. Negative reviews is something actually Tom a while ago in Board Game Breakfast at one point he talked about this, and something I've seen before and something I've said myself. Negative reviews are often viewed as more honest. They're not. They're not inherently more honest. Most games are good. Good versus great is a different conversation. That's why I rate things. That's why some things stay in my collection, some things don't. But most games are good. Someone who doesn't like most games isn't honest. They're just incredibly, very much a critique. They're the Simon Cowell of board games. Everything has to be critiqued, which is fine. There's value to that to a degree as well, but it's not inherently honest. There are a lot of people who are just... I guarantee you, by the way, let's take myself, okay? I guarantee you I could make more money, get more Patreons, get more ad revenue, get more views if I was willing to be negative for the sake of having hot takes. If I was willing to go into every single review and trash games. This game is horrible. Destiny's is garbage. I can't believe Lucky Duck put out a terrible game with a half-done app and then pitched it to everyone else and everyone loves it. It's garbage. I don't know what they're talking about. Hot takes are easy to sell. You have to sell them to the audience, not the publisher. But they do sell. They result in more Patreons. They result in more views. They result in more growth. They result in more traction. Negativity. Even this video, by the way. Even this video saying, hey, the video's titled, what's the video titled? I don't know. No one's getting paid for reviews. The whole subject of this video will do well because people want to click on negative things. People want the drama. People are seeking it out. The same reason why you clicked on this video to watch it is the same reason why trashing popular things will result in hot takes and viewership. No one's getting paid to tell you their honest opinion about a game. Unless, of course, they included the sponsor tag. It would be stupid. It would be short-sighted. The risk wouldn't be worth it. Behind the scenes, someone would tell you at some point. And over time, people would look at you and say, this channel is completely out of alignment with reality. Or this channel is always glowingly positive. Now, always glowingly positive, for what it's worth, does not mean that someone is taking money behind the scenes. There are many content creators who understandably just don't want to do negative content. They don't like trash and talk about it. They don't like trash talking things, or they don't want to keep playing something long enough to give you a negative opinion. I can understand and agree with both of those points. So it's not that an exclusively positive channel is negative. I would say look far more as to whether they are out of alignment with the general rankings. If they are telling you, if you look at the ratings, again, just look for negative games. There are bad games out there. And if people are always telling you that the bad games are great, then at a certain point you should probably stop watching that person, right? And at a certain point, most people would probably stop watching that person. And this is true. I'm not naming names, but I do know, and publicly, I know various channels that publicly take money for things and publicly always like things. And to some extent, their viewership does drop. I'm not talking about Rahdo, I'm not talking about anything like that. Rahdo's great. But there is going to be that aspect, and people will tune out because at a certain point, people will realize that there's nothing useful out of that information. So that's basically the point. There is bias. Yes, we'll talk about that another time. But I guarantee you, no one's secretly taking money behind the scenes to give you a positive opinion. Not on any large scale, at least. It just wouldn't be a secret for very long. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, have a good one.